I think they also could um, We need like a blue light or a green light or something. Oh, okay.
We got the thumbs up.
Okay. Good morning and welcome to the second quarter meeting of the Housing Advisory Board on June 4th, 2024. And I'd like to recognize our newest member, Elena Money-Garman.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And we've got a lot to cover today, so we'll just plunge into the agenda here. The first thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the last meeting, and I believe we do have a quorum among the four of us here. So any comments on the minutes?
I'll move to approve.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Good, we've done it.
If I could,
Sure.
before we go into the Apex Cares item, I think the clerk's office has some information they'd like to share for a moment.
Okay.
Okay, Ashley?
Hello, good evening. Or good morning.
I used to the evening meetings.
You're just used to saying that.
I wish it was evening. Good morning. Ashley Gentry, Deputy Town Clerk. So as you know, or may have heard, Val recently resigned. So the clerk's office is looking to reappoint that, or appoint that position, or fill that position, sorry. So back in March at your last meeting, have recently went through some nominations at their meeting and had a great pool of applicants from those nominations. There were several applicants who are still eligible and vetted by the HAB. So under the direction of the mayor and council, we'll continue to proceed with those names from the ballot system that we used. Our goal was to have someone in this seat by September. In order to do that, we need to go ahead and put that on the agenda. We need to orient this person on what's going on. And so that's where we're at with the next process for filling that vacant seat.
Okay, so any comments at this point? Because I do have one comment. Because we have 3 months now between this meeting and the September meeting, what I'd like to see is that an advertisement is made that we have a vacancy and that we invite other people who might be interested to submit a form and add whoever comes up. I think that maybe having a month of advertisement and application would be appropriate. Then at that time, we'll have plenty of time to look at the candidates. Now, were you saying, Ashley, that we would like to have that person in place by September?
That's correct.
Okay, so then how does the board discuss who would be the person to be passed along to the mayor to then pass along to the council? Would we have a special meeting, or we do that by email?
We can do either. We can have a special meeting. We can hold one if that works for everyone. I wouldn't. It's up to the board. Or Alan, do you have any suggestions?
Sure.
Feedback? Sorry.
No, that's okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, I think the field, to answer your question, I think because the board recently accepted, applications, and we got a good pool of candidates, and there were nominations that were made, there were alternate candidates that were already recommended. And so the first step is we're gauging the elected body, the mayor and council, to see if they would like to proceed with what HAB has already recommended, because there were some alternate candidates that were already there. And so if that's the pleasure of the mayor and council, then we'll be bringing those names forward, because HAB has already seen those names and they've already provided kind of a ranked choice of who has been nominated and how they would rank those candidates. So I think from our perspective, that's the first step, is gauging if there's interest from the mayor and council to re-advertise. I think that there's a strong pool of candidates. I know, for example, Patricia Birch as well as Dan Sargent were two candidates that were kind of in the next tier of folks, along with Elena. So I think that that's where we'll start. And certainly if that's, if they want us to continue to advertise, then we'll do that. We've got some other boards that we're about to advertise for anyway, so we can certainly include that in the discussion. And we accept applications at any point in time as well, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a strong recruitment process. My fear, just full transparency, is that if we do advertise that there's a vacancy on HAB and we've already got a good pool of candidates, I don't want to be misleading anybody that may really want to serve and there's only one position. And we've already got, I think, a good pool of candidates. But certainly we'll notate that that's your preference, is to advertise and see what the direction of that.
Okay, but it's really up to the mayor and the council if they decide that would be a good thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah, Jacob?
Is this, did we say, Ashley, did you say Molly's or Val?
Val.
Val, okay.
Molly's, I believe, is just not here.
Okay.
She's traveling, yeah.
Okay. All right. Oh, so Val resigned recently. How much time is on her term, or does that matter?
Well, I think all four of the remaining members, myself, Molly,
Val.
Rhett.
Val was there, and Rhett. I think all four of us, our terms are up this year.
October.
Yeah.
So that would be like filling through October, and then council would do another, depending on
Correct.
applications and terms. Okay, understood.
And that was the other reason too, is that we didn't want to do a full recruitment process if someone was going to be filling for.
Right. Makes sense.
So if someone wanted to apply still, then how much time do they have to do that before it goes through the mayor town council process?
It depends on what the mayor and the council decide together.
Okay.
So if the mayor just decides, hey, we already have names and people that really want to serve, so we'll just pick from this list of names, that's the way that it's going to go.
Okay.
But there's going to be a lot more positions coming up that are opening up after this next meeting. So, as Ashley was saying earlier, it's always open. People can always apply.
Well, that's what I
People
meant.
can always put their
That's
name
what I meant.
on.
So obviously the sooner the better.
Yes.
So the seat that this person would be filling, Val's seat,
Would-
there'll only be one meeting?
That's what I was getting to, yeah.
Oh.
Would,
Because her term, we don't change the terms.
no, I understand, but I'm wondering, would it be better to just have one meeting, that last meeting without that seat filled, and then whoever wants to get, in the next go around, then they're actually going to be starting in a full term and not running the risk of going to one meeting and then having to rerun for the spot.
So I think it's more than one meeting. I think the way we did it last time was in March is when.
Yeah, it kind of spilled over.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it would make more sense to me for the new people to be in place in March, but that's not the way it worked out last year. And so it would actually be September, December, and March that the new person would be serving, and then there would be a reappointment.
So,
Right.
so how about, we'll gauge, because the first step is gauging, the mayor and council's interest in appointing from that pool. So we'll start there, and then that'll kind of answer several other questions. So we'll start there, and then we'll get an email out to HAB once we've confirmed with the mayor and council.
Because it sounds like there's really three options, the most expedient of which would be to just go back to the pool,
Yes.
and something could be done by September without any additional meetings on our part.
Right.
The second would be, if we're going to open it up, as Phil's suggesting, then we either have to have some kind of special meeting or email in between, so that we're done by September, or we just talk about it September and they come in December. Those are really the three options I can see.
So they'd be there for 2 meetings then, December and March.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. All right. I think that's a good summary of what the options are. Okay. So we'll wait to hear.
We'll keep you updated
Yep.
on what that looks like.
Again, full transparency. I'll be talking to the mayor about this. Okay, that was the special introduction, and now we can get into the rest of the meeting. The next thing on the agenda is Lamont is going to be presenting the Apex Cares program revisions, and pay close attention because they're hopefully we'll be able to make a motion at the end of this to approve this and send it on to the council, actually recommend it and send it on to the council for approval. Okay. Floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Chair, Mr. Chair, and members of NAB. Lamont Taylor once again with Community Development and Neighborhood Connections. The first item on the docket today is an update on the Apex Cares program.
Lamont, can I just ask you, do you prefer to have questions while you go through, or would you prefer us to wait? Either way is fine.
My purpose is that they come at the end.
Okay, all right, good.
So, so two general updates, one to the housing rehab program, and then a new program idea to assist homeless persons with needs to get services in the county. And so we'll get to that slide and I'll tell you more about that. But to just by way of background, the current program provides assistance to low-income homeowners for repairs to their homes. And it's currently administered by Rebuilding Together of the Triangle. And currently the program provides up to $20,000 in assistance for home repairs in the form of a grant. This slide sort of gives you an overview of the program guidelines. The current program has no age restrictions. The AMI limit is 65%. It is a townwide program. Again, it's in the form of a grant, and the application period is open continuously. The revised program would provide assistance to low-income homeowners through 4 program components with a maximum amount of assistance of $40,000. The new program components would include substantial rehab, urgent repair, architectural barrier removal, and weatherization. So the substantial rehab program would provide repairs for 2 or more faulty systems, such as heating and cooling systems, electrical, plumbing, or structural problems. Structural repairs may include roofs, porches, joists, columns, beams, doors, windows, and seals. The goal of this is to address issues before they become problems that require more extensive and expensive solutions. And the eligible housing types are indicated on the slide. The next program is really just a smaller version of substantial repair, as it would provide repairs to one condition in a home causing immediate or near-term danger, such as heating, cooling, roof hazards, electrical, plumbing, structural, and other problems that without immediate repairs would cause danger. And again, the eligible housing types would be single-family detached, condominium, townhome, as well as manufactured homes. And you'll see, as indicated, repairs to manufactured homes would be limited to heating and cooling systems, roof hazards. Yes, do I need a mic? It's right there. Sorry.
We can't hear you on the live stream, so that's something.
I think I naturally went to that side because, okay, there we go. Is that better?
Yep.
All right, everybody hear me? Roof hazards and plumbing. New program, architectural barrier removal, and this would be minor repairs to increase accessibility by removing physical architectural barriers or installing elements of accessible design such as grab bars, stair lifts, wheelchair ramps, etc., which will allow elderly and disabled homeowners to age in place and remain safely in their home. And weatherization. minor repairs to improve the energy efficiency and reduce energy costs for the homeowner. And some services may include sealing air leaks, installing insulation in attics, walls, and floors, sealing and insulating ducts, installing smart thermostats, replacing existing lighting with energy efficient light bulbs, and performing tune-ups and repairs to heating and cooling systems. This next slide is sort of an overview of the eligible households and some of the attributes of the program. And you'll notice that we've made some program changes in terms of the qualifying households. For instance, the substantial homeowner rehab has no age restriction. It is provided to residents who have lived in their property for a minimum of 3 years, and the maximum amount of assistance is $40,000 in the form of a 10-year forgivable loan. Urgent repair would be available to homeowners with no age restriction and would provide a $15,000 grant. And that program would be available to homeowners who have lived in the home for 3 years minimum. Moving on to architectural barrier removal, our proposed program change would limit that to elderly households with 62 years of age or older and or disabled. And that program would be available in the form of a $5,000 grant. And lastly, the weatherization program would be eligible to any homeowner and would be provided in the form of a $2,500 grant. And I'm going to return to a previous slide because I failed to mention that some of the programs would be eligible for renter households, and that would be weatherization as well as architectural barrier removal. And so the requirements for rental units in those programs, the property owner would be required to contribute a 10% cash match for the repairs and must rent to low income tenants for a period of at least 5 years following the completion of the repairs. And of course, that will add some staff involvement, town staff, in terms of monitoring for income residency and the owner contribution to the program. And so I'll take questions about rehab if you have any at this point, and then we'll move on to the last program.
Okay, so you're ready for questions at this
Yes, sir.
point? Okay, so can we go back to get to the third slide? No, sorry. They're not numbered, so it's on our page 3, top of the page. The maximum assistance amount is $40,000.
I'm sorry.
That's
Go
okay.
on.
That's yeah, that's right. So I think we do honestly need to increase to 20,000 because since it was put into effect, what, in 2020, something like that, construction costs have increased substantially. I'm sure everyone knows that. So my only question is that seems like it has the potential to reduce the number of homeowners, households that we can help. And so would there be a corresponding increase in the budget that would keep the number of households that we can help, even?
Well, that's a great question. And so there would be, and I'm going to take some privilege here. Yeah, we want to be able to assist as many households as we possibly can with available funding. The program right now is funded at $250,000. And so, yes, with the implementation of these new program revisions, the idea would be to request additional budget to serve more households. And we're working on what those metrics might look like based on our program guideline caps.
Okay, so the next fiscal year budget is in process as we speak. In fact, I think didn't the council consider it at their last May May meeting. And so is it possible to get that increase, because it's going to go into effect basically in August, right? Is that the proposal?
I'm going to let our director speak to that directly.
Good morning, Marla Newman, Community Development and Neighborhood Connections Director. So the budget is generally, that you're speaking of, is the town's operational budget by and large. The Apex Cares program is funded through the Affordable Housing Fund.
Right.
So we would be asking for authorization just to increase what comes out of that particular fund. So that doesn't have a direct impact on the town's operational budget, which is going through the approval process now.
Okay, but it might take money away from other programs that are funded by the Affordable Housing Fund.
Potentially, but we've got a series of conversations we're having with council around how we allocate additional dollars to the Affordable Housing Fund and some other strategies just to increase the pool of funding available. But in the short term, we don't see any immediate challenges to our ability to support Apex Cares at a higher level of investment today.
Okay, good. Any other questions on this particular slide, the maximum assistance going up to 40,000? Jacob?
This is super cool to see this. I run a very similar program here in North Carolina, but it's for rural areas, and we have funding from the Department of Labor to do this specific thing in rural areas, not urban or suburban areas. And the neat what we found is that, and we've been doing this over the last 5 years. What I've found is that $20,000 doesn't go far, like as y'all were saying, and especially since 2020. And then the cool thing about something like this is that it keeps somebody in their home, whether that is their home, and that in a tight market where there isn't any, it's very competitive. So there's an immediate quality of life improvement, and that is super cool to see. I haven't, other than the program we run, I've never seen another program like this, and I'm not aware of any others in North Carolina. So I'm really, and if we could do this in urban and suburban areas, I would. But I'm glad to see this is moving in Apex too, and I think 40,000 is great.
I have a comment about one of the further slides about weatherization. So the biggest thing that I see with this is obviously this helps the person in a lot of different ways, but it actually also helps the town. So one of the things that we as a town struggle with is we have a peak payment with electricity, and that tends to be the hottest time of the year whenever people are using their AC at the max level. And if we can come in and help with the energy efficiency of the house, it helps not only them with reducing their payment potentially for electricity and things like that, but it also helps the town's peak payment reduce.
Good point.
So, it's a benefit to taxpayers as well, because that payment can be substantial. So just good comment there.
Good.
So.
Thanks, Audrey. Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
On the maximum assistance amount, and I'll come back to the weatherization as well. The other thing that made staff want to look at the level of support was we discovered in kind of going through our billing from Rebuilding Together that they had essentially gone out and had to raise almost $200,000 to supplement our investment for a number of the homes that had significant deferred maintenance. And so that, I'm sure that was a burden that they had not anticipated when they contracted with the town to administer the program. So this would also take up some pressure off of RTT to go out and raise funds to support our program. And then on the weatherization piece, while we're looking at approximately $2,500 for that, all of these are up to. So it won't be, you just get this amount, period. But this is also an opportunity for the town to collaborate with others who are in that space that provide weatherization. And so we look for this to be a collaborative approach, such that there may be needs that go beyond the 2,500. It's just that we will contribute 2,500 and they would be eligible, for instance, like to Wake County or whatever. So we're also going to be looking at how we can leverage other funds that can be deployed here in town. And it always helps those people say, if you're asking us being, let's say Wake County or whomever, for money, they want to know what's your skin in the game. So this would be kind of like our skin in the game to help update the homes.
That's great.
I have a couple of questions. First off, I agree with Jacob. I think this is a great program, and I like the provisions as a whole. The first question, I mean, I think going from 20 to 40 max is kind of a no-brainer just because of costs. But then the specific, like 15,000 for urgent repair, 5,000 for architectural barrier, 2,500 for weatherization. Those numbers seem about right to me, but how did y'all come up with those numbers?
That's a great question. And so we looked at other programs. That's one way we did it. And then the other is as you notice, the urgent repair program is kind of limited to one system. So that's kind of how we arrived at that figure. So it wasn't really I can't say that we did a sophisticated analytical process, but this, just as you mentioned, it just seemed to be in line with other programs that we see, Wake County really being our best example.
And have you talked to RTT about these numbers at all?
We are actually in negotiation with them for a new contract.
Okay.
And so one of the considerations in those discussions will be first about capacity, because they serve other communities, and so this will be new to them. And then just how we can implement the programs, because for instance, new to this would be a forgivable loan program. And so how do we manage that, get a deed recorded, that kind of thing, and monitor compliance with the loan provisions. So those are discussions yet to come, but we will be factoring all of that into those conversations.
Well, I was moved by what Marla said about the cost differential, that gap.
Sure.
And the Home Builders Association has done some projects with Rebuilding Together of the Triangle. And in recent years, we have to raise a bunch of money in order to go work on their projects. And we've seen the amount that we need to raise increase. So yeah, I'm all about raising the amounts on this side. The last question I have is on the rental units, the weatherization, and the architectural barrier, that the property owners are required to contribute 10% cash match. Is that 10% above and beyond these amounts, or 10% of the amount? So
10% of the amount.
okay.
I have a question on that too. Are you?
Well, I guess because if that's the case, yeah, so the on the architectural barrier, the homeowner would have to contribute up to $500, meaning the town would only pay $4,500 then.
That's correct.
Rather than the project potentially being a $5,500 project.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
So, Elaine?
My question was about the 65% AMI for the architectural barrier removal and the weatherization. That's for the renter, not for the.
That is for the renter.
Okay, so the renter qualifies, and then I see the provision that they have to. My worry was that it would improve the value of the unit, and then there would be no skin in the game for them to continue renting to the low-income recipient. But I see the cash match in there. That was my question. Whose AMI is it, and is there some security for the renters?
Yes, and also to maintain affordability in that unit, a 5-year requirement to rent, not necessarily to that renter, but to a low-income renter for a period of 5 years.
Okay.
And so we'll be monitoring that on our side.
Okay. Great.
The same thing is done on our program. We actually meet with the property owner and ask, what are your plans, long-term plans for this unit? Because if they say, well, I'm going to sell it in next year, then that's probably not a project we need to work on. So we kind of, there's a bunch of questions you ask on the front end to see
Yeah.
what's your plans with this unit, and then how can we help with those, assuming that they align with ours.
You're talking landlords now,
Yeah.
specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned RTT capacity, and I'm wondering about whether they have the capacity to do the urgent repairs. And so that leads me to question, well, what does it mean to have an urgent repair? What is the guideline for how rapidly repairs need to be made for, on an urgent basis? Is it like within a week, within a month?
We would have to work that out.
Okay.
It is sort of, so some programs are called emergency repair, which I think is a
I
misnomer.
think the county has one.
Yeah, and it's not really emergency because you can't
Right.
just call and get assistance the same day. So that would have to be worked out in terms of what that looks like, and what we do in an emergency situation. Let's say a tree falls on the top of a house and you've got to have it tarped like soon, and we'll need to talk to them about that. And there may be other project partners that can participate as well. So that's a discussion that we'll definitely have to have.
So that's probably going to be part of the contract negotiations
Yes, it
with
will.
RTT. I mean, honestly, if they're really urgent repairs, then there might need to be some kind of safety valve where it's possible to contract with a commercial service provider just to take care of the household, because they, like if it's the middle of winter and their furnace breaks, they can't wait a month to get a new furnace.
Correct.
So,
And Marla?
So to your point, Phil, that's actually one of the things that we're looking at, and I've got experience from another jurisdiction where we did a process to solicit a relationship with a number of providers, so your HVAC folks, your plumbing, your electrical, and then on a rotating basis, when one of these situations comes up, we call that entity and they come to the forefront. We had even had a TARP program for individuals where it was going to take a while to do the work write-up, to bid it out, and to get all of the other work done. But in the short term, if there was a hole in the roof and it's raining, we automatically got that very initial information and sent a contractor out to put a tarp on while they went through the rest of the approval process. So as I mentioned a moment ago, we're looking at other collaborative opportunities so that the burden wouldn't all fall on RTT. So there'd be some things that they could handle, some things that we would look maybe for a third party to handle. And so those would be some of the conversations we have with them around capacity. They may have some contractors already as part of their portfolio of vendors with whom we could have a relationship with. But I think for us, if it was going to be a third party handling that, then we'd need a mechanism for who actually does the outreach and the monitoring and inspections and things of that nature. So all of those things will factor into the contract negotiation.
yeah.
I have a question too about the amounts of money that you put under each of these. So in talking with Rebuilding Together, are these like the max levels that they've spent on properties, or are these the average levels that they spent on properties? Because to me, I'd rather give a max amount rather than a average amount, because if they're going to continually go over that amount to be able to repair these properties in some way, then they're still outraising money. They're still having to do that over and above and beyond. So I'm just...
So that's a good question, because one of the things that we looked at, this iteration of ideas is actually focused on systems. So health and safety issues, more so than your aesthetics, right? So we want to make sure people are in safe and secure housing. And so focusing our investments on those things that can impact health and safety rather than the other, I think gives us an opportunity to get more substantive work done, if you will. And so the 40 max, you can get a couple of systems repaired, we think, for $40,000. Certainly, you know, we can start with this particular iteration and see how the actual jobs come in. But I think by us switching to a focus on systems will enable us to kind of keep more control over costs. Sometimes when we're doing more of the aesthetics, you know, that can fluctuate wildly depending on what the homeowner may be requesting. But if ours is to maintain, like I said, health and safety, that's the primary thing. And so I feel pretty strongly that we can get there, but sure enough, I think time as we go through this new iteration will help us know if that's enough or if we have to go even higher. I would say that the ones that would likely go over 40,000 would be far and few between. When we look at the list of homes that went over to 20,000 when RTT was working initially, there weren't a ton of them, but it was substantial enough to where they really needed an infusion of capital. Yeah. So I think this is one where time will tell if 40 is enough for that maximum, or if we'll need to come back to you maybe this time next year or what have you, once we get an opportunity to get some jobs under their belt and pay for those.
So Audra, one thing I noticed is that these numbers are supposed to be maxes. Mm-hmm. They're listed as maximum assistance. The other point I want to make is that I know in talking to the RTT executive director that they often refer repairs, especially like weatherization, to other organizations that they know do that, like Resources for Seniors, for instance. Right. And so to the extent that they already have a process in place for doing that referral, I would just say, keep going. Mm-hmm. But to the extent where maybe the town needs to get involved, then, you know, then identify that particular circumstance. No, my point is just take advantage of RTT's expertise to the extent you can.
Right, and this is also an opportunity to leverage, right? Because, you know, weatherization can cost more than $2,500. Mm-hmm. So if let's say the county's program is $5,000 and that homeowner needs $6,000, well then our part can supplement and close that gap, right? So the whole goal here is how do we leverage our resources with others that are available so that we can get the maximum support overall for that homeowner. So
we can put tax dollars to work in Apex.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I do have a couple other questions, but does anyone have any questions on other slides in here? I'm really happy to see that manufactured homes are going to be included in the 3 categories. And so that raises a question in my mind, because I realize that, and I think RTT does have bilingual agents that go out and speak to the homeowners and actually do the repairs and so forth, but that's important because there are many, many manufactured home owners who are Spanish speaking, and they would probably feel more comfortable in dealing with someone that is able to speak that language. So that's the one thing I want to mention. The other is, and I'm also happy to see that rental homes are recommended. It was pointed out to me that, and I'm surprised that you guys didn't figure it out already, but to subsidize, to continue to have the renters be low income, there is a cost to the landlord for that. And it's probably a cost that's more than what they get out of the repair. And so I think we need to be careful to fashion or to create the program which is not causing them to lose money. That's as simply as I can say it. So you might need to do a little tweaking in terms of maybe the cash back part of it, or maybe the affordability part of it. you know, whether it's taking the 5 years and making it smaller or making it a little larger, I think there needs to be flexibility in there to make sure that we're, you know, we're doing right by the landlords, because we want them, you know, to get involved in these things. The other important question is, it's the 65% AMI that is the renter part of it. And so it sounds like there's going to be a joint application process where the renter has a part in the application and the landlord has a part in the application. And so I'm just pointing that out. I'm sure you thought about that before, but that makes it a little bit more complicated, honestly.
Agreed. So effectively, in the rental programs, it would be the landlord effectively applying. So the renter says, I need some architectural barrier removals, or maybe some modifications, some additions. We say removal, but also additions, and of course weatherization. And so, yeah, the landlord would be the applicant, and then the tenant would be sort of the recipient.
Yeah.
Well, regardless, I mean, a lot of times when landlords are making, you know, repairs and improvements, they're needed repairs and improvements anyway. So the fact that they're getting help from the town to do those improvements with this category is just a benefit to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
The fact that they have to provide, you know, 10% instead of the full amount to pay
Right.
for it is a benefit. So I think I hear what you're saying, but I feel like it's actually a better situation for them. So
I gotta agree with, from my experience running this over the 5 years, not this particular program, but one very similar to it. We require 50% match, so 10% is very generous, I think. So, and what we have found is that when we ask them for 50% of the cost of the project, they'll actually do a little bit more, because they were planning, they thought they had to come out with 10,000, 20,000, whatever that money is. And then when they realize it's less, well, now I can address the roof or whatever other situation. So it's actually, we have found that at least 75% of and we've done 86 projects in North Carolina in the last 11 months, that the owner has actually gone above. We actually try to talk about the leverage cost with the owner, and we track that. So I think 10% is pretty generous.
I do too.
Okay, all right, good,
Yeah.
good. All right, that sounds good. Let me just see if I have any other comments. When the repairs are going on in the apartments and the rental units, is it expected that the tenants will be able to stay in those units when that's going on?
That's a great question. And so in a substantial repair situation, likely not.
They don't qualify for substantial repair, do they?
So in a substantial repair, the repairs would be such that they would probably need to temporarily move out. But for the more minor repairs, less likely.
Okay, so I see the renters qualify for either architectural barrier removal or weatherization. So yeah, I'm glad that it's not under substantial repair and so forth, because obviously I'm worried about, you know, displacing tenants, and then you probably have to pay for hotel for them to stay in, and that's not a very comfortable situation. Okay. That's good, as long as, you know, we're sensitive to the fact that we're trying to do repairs that don't require them. Maybe they have to leave for a couple hours, but they don't have to leave for days at a time, right?
Yes.
I know that I've taken part in some of the RTT programs, as I mentioned before, and we've gone out to houses where, you know, there were holes in the roof, or the bathroom floor had rotted out, or any number of things. And as we're there helping and doing this, the residents are still there. I mean, so we're kind of working around them.
Yeah. Well, that's ideal. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can do that,
Right.
That's great.
Talk about added stress, though.
right.
So I noticed that the staff has to monitor income, residency, and owner contribution. It seems like if the landlord is doing maybe a couple of units a year, then it would be 5 years. In other words, someone would have to keep track, including the landlord, and which units are going to end their, the affordability period, right?
But now let's make sure we're clear, we're not doing your traditional multifamily rentals. So we're talking condominiums, townhomes, single-family units that are for rent, not a property with 10 or 20 units, right?
Okay, so that wasn't clear from this.
At the bottom of each slide,
Maybe I missed
it
it.
says eligible housing types, single-family detached, condominium, townhome, and manufactured home.
Yeah, there's no multifamily mention.
Yeah. Okay, so multifamily buildings, units and multifamily buildings would not qualify.
Right, what we call your traditional apartments. So a townhouse or a condo, those are likely, or not likely, those can be rental units, much like the single-family detached, but we're not talking about your traditional multifamily apartment units and things of that nature.
Okay,
Owned by a bigger company. And
Right.
therefore has
yeah,
more tax.
yeah, okay, well, I guess that just wasn't clear to me, but it makes sense what you're saying.
And again, the monitoring period would be 5 years, and we would have some attestation or affidavit and income documentation to verify that, and then we would monitor that period of affordability through its term
For that particular unit.
for that particular unit, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to get into the housing connections part of this now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And just no other questions on this part? Okay. Go ahead.
So the Housing Connections Program is a new concept that was kind of birthed. We've had a few residents to reach out to the town for assistance who were experiencing housing instability and in some cases unsheltered homelessness. And so we realized that really assisting those residents was very difficult because most of the services in the county are in Raleigh. And so case management is often needed, sometimes transportation to services and other supportive services. And so this program would provide a pathway. It wouldn't provide the direct services, but it would provide a pathway to those services to access and stabilize their housing situation. And so that's our idea here. We haven't obviously worked out all the details. So this is very conceptual, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
So the idea with this is that we are trying to gather the necessary information and program information to give to people who are experiencing this.
That is correct.
Okay, so not necessarily providing a house position for them somewhere, but giving them the information so that they can navigate it.
Connect them to services.
Right. One of the things that we've encountered is that there is a need for services, but to get someone from Raleigh to come here has been a non-starter, essentially. And so, we're asking ourselves, well, what can we do to help folks get served? And so kind of creating that opportunity for us to get them to Raleigh, to those services. We've even looked at whether we could help in some way to set up an actual initial appointment for the individual so that when we do help them get to Raleigh, they already have an appointment with a case manager who can do intake and housing navigation right away. So it's a little bit different, but we've gotten calls about people facing eviction and they've needed help, and because we're not a service provider, we kind of felt between a rock and a hard place. And so that's when we said, well, what's that thing that we could do, that could at least be a hand up. And so we thought, well, if we could get them to the services, that could be a good start. And so part of this is us also talking with some of the service providers where there is an understanding that if we send someone, we're going to call you and say, we've got somebody for you. They say, send them on, right? And so there may be a couple of places that we have that kind of relationship with, you know, depending on whether it's a family, then what are those agencies that work with families versus those who work with single individuals. So those are some of the other things that we're working on, but we feel that at the very least, we've got to get the folks to the services to help get their support underway.
So this slide is covering on the agenda the Homeless Transportation Assistance Program?
And that is a good point. That was actually originally the thinking, but the program idea has changed to what you see on the slide.
Okay.
So the agenda bullet point is not accurate. It has some similarity,
So
but
it's
it's a
expanded.
more robust program, and that's my fault because I didn't change the bullet point. But yeah, what you see in Housing Connections is really what we're trying to do here.
Okay, so my point would be, please be aware of the services that organizations like Western Wake Crisis Ministry provides, because they specifically provide housing stability case management. They have a case manager who will provide that service. Now, unfortunately, for the last couple years, they've been kind of in a leadership transition. That's very politely saying that they're still looking for the right executive director, honestly. But they have an interim executive director and they have a case manager. And I think it might be worth investigating what they can cover, because it would be a lot easier for people to get to Western Wake Crisis Ministry on Olive Chapel Road than to go into Raleigh for the county services, which I assume is what you're talking about.
No, actually. So one, we do have contact with Western Wake.
Okay.
And I don't know if you are aware that they are in a due diligence period for a merger with Dorcas Ministries. So there's a lot going on
Yes,
with
I am
Western
aware of
Wake.
that, yeah.
But we are, in terms of Apex, we are part of what's called North Carolina, I think it's 500, which is the continuum of care dealing with homelessness.
Okay.
And so what I think I understand Western Wake is doing is they can provide some emergency rental assistance, you know, to cover a gap. So if someone blew a tire, needed to get the car fixed so they could get to work, but now they're $200 short on their rent, that's the kind of thing that I know Western Wake can do. What we're looking at are some folks who have slightly more complicated situations that actually require case management. And it's with the idea of preventing homelessness, right? And so there are some other services and things that are in fact available through the continuum of care, or what we often call the COC. Because we're a member, part of our position is some of those tax dollars need to be used for the folks here who have that struggle. But we've been in contact with Western Wake and know what they offer and have already discussed, you know, how we can continue to partner together.
Okay.
So we're looking at not only what they do, but something even larger, especially as we're encountering unsheltered people on the street. Then that requires another level of support that is in line with what the COC is supposed to help facilitate. So that's why we're looking at getting some people to Raleigh versus what we might be able to do with Western Wake, which can cover a gap from time to time. It's another form of prevention or diversion, but what we're looking for is a little bit more comprehensive.
Okay, all right.
Lamont, is this a program that you would outsource to a local nonprofit, or is this something that the town would take up and do?
I thought, and Marla, I'll let you.
Outsource,
Yeah.
because we're not a direct service provider.
I didn't think
And so the idea is, again, if you use Western Wake, which is one of the groups we actually talked about trying to collaborate with, we provide the funding to them when there is a need for someone to get to wherever the services are. So, we will not take on direct service delivery, but we'll help pay for a little bit of it.
Completely understand.
Yes.
I love both of these things. So, I mean, the updates for the CARES program, we knew it was needed, absolutely. And, seeing this, because I've also got calls personally with people experiencing, imminent evictions and, housing instability. And it is very difficult, other than saying, Wake County has services for you. You kind of have your hands tied as to what we can do personally here in Apex. So, yeah, I'm glad to see this.
Yeah, I agree. This is a big improvement on the whole Apex Cares program. So if there's no further discussion, I'd like to entertain a motion, because we are expected for the agenda to make a motion on this, to approve the revisions so that they can then go on to town council.
Motion to approve the recommended program revisions for the Apex Care
Thank you.
program.
Second, okay. Any further discussion?
Thank y'all for working on this.
Okay, let's take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I think that's all of the quorum. So unanimously passed. Thank you very much. Great job, good work, and thank you. Now we have the next agenda item, and there's Lamont's twin that's going to be presenting this. You're really busy today, Lamont. This is the baptism.
Presentation. Thanks very much. Okay, so next up, some updates on potential policy options for the Affordable Housing Incentive Zoning Policy. As you're aware,
Did the HAB members get a copy of that? I don't see it in our,
it was sent out yesterday, Friday, I believe.
but do we have a hard copy?
Oh, no.
We do not have I don't have a hard copy.
We don't have a hard copy here either.
Okay, all right, I'm just, as long as it's not sitting in a pile someplace, that's fine. Okay, proceed.
We'll make sure you get that this afternoon, because we do have it. And thankfully, it's a discussion point, so, is that it?
Right, yeah. Okay, carry on.
So really just an overview of what we've been working on is that we've looked at various policy options in other communities, some with similar characteristics to Apex in terms of demographics and distribution of wealth and some other factors. And so the discussion today will really focus on some of the more powerful tools that we've seen in other communities to advance this idea of inclusionary zoning. So in North Carolina, in general, inclusionary zoning is prohibited by North Carolina General Statute. But there are some special circumstances in 3 communities where special legislation was granted to create required and mandatory incentive zoning in development of new residential development. So this is really a chart of those mandatory inclusionary zoning communities in North Carolina, which are town of Carrboro, town of Davidson, and town of Chapel Hill. And what you'll notice There are some differences, but what's key to all of them is really, one, that they are required, and two, density is really the top incentive that the developer receives with this requirement. There are minimum set-asides, and of course, in the town of Chapel Hill, it depends on the zoning district. And the town of Chapel Hill is also unique in that all new residential and renovation or redevelopment of existing multifamily requires incentive zoning. And in the case of a renovation or redevelopment, the policy is triggered if an existing multifamily property is expanded or redeveloped and adds 5 or more units to what is existing. So we thought that that was a really interesting characteristic of Chapel Hill. All compliance, the compliance options are very similar to, they are all very similar with a few exceptions. The town of Davidson does not allow donation of land, but they do allow payment in lieu. And the other thing that's really interesting is the income mixes that are targeted. So in the town of Carborough, it's up to 80% AMI. However, in the town of Davidson, it's up to 120% AMI, but it must include a mix of low and moderate incomes. And then similarly, in town of Chapel Hill, up to 80% AMI, but the majority of the affordable units must be set aside for 60% or below area median income. So some really interesting program requirements there.
Is majority just over 50%, like a normal? Like the majority trigger, the majority of affordable units, does that just mean normal?
It's 51% or more.
Okay,
That is
okay.
correct. And they have a very interesting citation to kind of
Okay.
illustrate that. It was like 50% plus 1 unit or something like that. And we were like, okay, does that mean 51% or? So yeah, it's more than 50, correct. Montgomery County, Maryland, probably the most notable example of incentive zoning, where it is also required. And in Montgomery County, Maryland, there is a program called the Moderately Priced Dwelling Unit Program, the MPDU. And the program requires that a percentage of housing units in residential developments be made available to low and moderate income households for a certain time frame. An MPDU is required to be affordable to households earning 70% of AMI for the Washington, D.C. metropolitan statistical area, for high-rise apartments, and for all sale units, and 65% AMI for garden-style rental apartments. Developers must provide 12.5 and 15% of the total number of units in every subdivision with 20 or more units to be moderately priced. Some developments exceed those standards to take advantage of a tax or development incentive provided by the county. And the program was one of the first successfully implemented inclusionary zoning programs in the country, producing to date more than 17,000 units.
Can we take questions on?
We can take questions, yes.
On the first part of this?
Absolutely. I can go back.
To begin with?
Yes, because this is a very dense topic, so certainly.
Any comments? Jacob, you must have a comment.
No.
No? Okay, okay. Paul?
I'm curious. I know the item on Apex Cares, we had a presentation and then kind of an action item on it. And is this just kind of for information only kind of thing, or?
That's a great question. This is for information. It is the compilation of some of the research we have done. As you recall, this item came up at the March meeting. And so what we shared was that we would go back and look at some potential policy options, not necessarily recommendations, to bring back to you as we formulate a final draft policy. And so these are just some of the examples that we saw that we think parts of maybe hybrids that we might consider in a policy revision here in Apex.
In a policy revision to the incentive zoning?
That is correct.
Yeah, if I could add a little something to that. As I understand it, when the IZ policy was adopted last year, the idea was in about a year or so, we would come back, be able to report, if, how it's been helpful, if at all, and what changes might be necessary. And so this is kind of that first step into at least understanding what are some potential policy ideas that we could bring to you all to consider. We're looking at both financial incentives as well as non-financial incentives. And so, that's requiring a lot of research. So we wanted to be able to let you know that we've actually started the process, and here are a few things that we've seen so far, but there will be a more robust list of policy opportunities that we would bring in September. So this was just kind of to let you know we are working on it as per what was, I think, agreed or discussed when the policy was adopted last year.
No, that's exactly right.
And it
We
makes
said
sense to look at the programs out there that have been most successful, like what has been, for example, this, obviously that 17,000 units is quite awesome.
It says for a certain time frame. Do you know what it is?
It is, it's in their code and it changes.
Okay.
So I can get back with you on what the time frame is. I believe in rental it's 30 years, but don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But we'll get that to you in a follow up.
So then, at the September meeting, are we going to be looking at some of the metrics of the IZ policy and look at some actual numbers on success? Maybe then we can evaluate where are the weaknesses, where are the strengths, and so forth.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Paul. The idea was after a year, we'd have some experience with how well they're working. And so it would really be good for us to hear how effective they were and where they might need to be tweaked a bit. So the other thing, and I don't want to start a big hubbub here, but I have done a little bit of research into inclusionary zoning, including this book that came out from the UNC School of Government, and I'm glad to get extra copies and provide them around. But what was interesting to me is that the two lawyers that put this together said, they recognize that we are Dillon State and the powers that municipalities have emanate from the General Assembly. But their point was that inclusionary zoning is kind of in a gray area. It's not permitted, but it's also not prohibited. And in fact, my understanding is that Chapel Hill did not ask for legislative relief to do their inclusionary zoning, that they just went ahead and did it. And so I just want to correct the record on what you said at the beginning. And, if people have other information that, that corrects me, that's fine too. But my research has shown that it is possible. Now, I think Davidson did go after legislative relief. I don't know about Carborough, but it depends on how bold the community is. Let me just put it that way. But I think it's definitely an option that we should consider as a town and as a housing advisory board. So
we've had some initial conversation with the town attorney about what is and what isn't permitted by state statute based on our collective experiences in other jurisdictions and my extensive conversation with the city attorney where I came from. You have to get a special legislative act to do what it is you want to do. However, with any of the policies ultimately that we would look to bring to you, all of those have to go through the town attorney anyway. So there are some things that council has the authority to enact, but there are other things, and we've had this conversation where we know clearly we will need to go to the General Assembly and ask for enabling legislation. So we're looking at a two-pronged approach, what can be done by our council, but also what things do we need the legislature to grant us the ability to do as well.
And I believe you said last week that we have hired a lobbyist.
The town has.
The town has hired a lobbyist that could be involved in something like this.
Once we're clear on what things we might want to ask the General Assembly for, then we would work with the town clerk's office to arrange the conversations with the lobbyist and the town attorney and all of that.
Okay, okay. Okay. What is, thank you, Rebecca, by the way, for providing the handouts here. What's interesting to me is, just looking at the inclusionary zoning part of this, the minimum project size to trigger the policy, you know, I think what we have in our incentive zoning policy is 20 or more. These are quite, you know, a lot lower. I just point that out. The minimum set aside is, you know, the minimum of all three of these is 10%. I think ours is 5%. So it, you know, but I'm also interested in what the effect of this has been for the policy so far, because that's the real world experience. The other thing I want to mention is that there is a possibility of payment in lieu fee in each of these programs. I'm honestly glad that Apex does not have that option, because my experience has been that payment in lieu goes into a fund that may or may not be used for the proper purpose. And so I would rather have either units, either homes, apartments or whatever, or land provided as opposed to payment in lieu. So that's just, you know, a preference that I
think our
Has that.
we do have the fund that people have contributed to. My issue with the payment in lieu is that it has been historically low
Exactly.
and not effective enough to be able to actually build affordable housing, which
Okay.
has always been my, you know, my push for affordable housing is actually having built units somewhere for people to
exactly.
actually live in that are affordable. So, yeah.
And I will mention in each of these examples, there are calculations for the payment in lieu. Whereas I think what our policy does not have is an actual calculation.
Yeah, and
So
I hope it stays that way.
Actually, to the extent we already have that ability for developers to access, our ultimate recommendation will be that the amount increases substantially to what it would take to build a unit. Not so much the ground, the cost of the ground, but the hard cost for construction.
Bricks and bricks.
Yes, then that should be the contribution to the fund, not $15,000, right? Because you can't get anything with $15,000. So if our goal is a unit, then the contribution should be consistent with the construction hard costs to get that unit. So that would be one of the ultimate recommendations we would come back with. You know, obviously we'd have to figure out an amount that we would want to tell developers they would have to contribute to the fund if they didn't want to build it themselves. And I know it'll be a touchy situation, but you know, if that's what we need to get more units out the ground, you know, we've got to get as creative as we can to make sure we can get the units. And so that's a definite point of conversation going forward.
I have a comment on that as a builder, as a home builder, and we buy finished developed lots from developers, so I don't develop any of the lots that my company builds on. And so what, to get the unit, I think the timing is critical on when that money is due. Could be a very sophisticated way of softening the blow on the developer or the builder. My expectation is that some developers would, you know, because many of us we're beholden to the developers to feed our, you know, companies, and so that fee would likely get passed to me to absorb whatever that unit, the cost of that unit is.
Yeah.
But allowing me to build that money up through the success of the community is a much softer bill to pay than at the beginning when we're paying such large amounts to just, we haven't recouped, we haven't made any money. It's just all money out the door. There's no money to us for, you know, the first event is 8 months maybe, from the time of construction, when usually we're paying deposits, you know, years before. So I think the timing of that towards the end of projects or towards a significant portion into the progress of the project could help soften the blow. But some people won't be amenable to that at all.
Right. And right now, the contributions come in at the end.
Okay,
So, yeah, we don't.
the very end. Yeah, okay.
Or I don't know if there's a percentage of substantial completion, but for most of them, they've come in at the very end of the project.
Can, Phil?
Go ahead.
I want to change up the stakeholders or this a little bit. And it's almost like a fable. Let's say we limited the amount of food that came into this city, and then we require farmers to pay into a fund to subsidize the more expensive food for those of lower incomes. I mean, that's kind of the discussion that this is that the builder isn't creating the demand for housing. They would like to, but that doesn't happen. Just like a farmer doesn't create the demand for food, and yet we're asking for a solution from a group that is just trying to respond to a demand and put houses on the ground or in services. And if it's a true community need, I think it's something that the entire community should bear. Just my thoughts. Just like food.
Okay. Let me think about that and get back to you on that. I think I have
I
some
just wanted to change up the
contrasting
stakeholders a bit and see if it made any sense.
One of the reasons that I prefer to have developers provide either lots or homes is because I think the best practice for providing affordable homes is to have mixed income communities, as opposed to having segregated communities. And I mean segregated by income, right? We've tried that in the past, and it hasn't worked out too well. And so having a mixed income development that has both, for example, habitat homes in it, as well as what I'll call market rate homes, that helps solve the problem that I see of developers not providing enough of the homes at the lower price points. And so that's the problem that I perceive. And when I heard the DFI presentation back in December, and I heard that 7% of the people that work in Apex live in Apex, and that's down from about 12% like a few years ago, that's a problem. That's a big problem. Because then, you know, when you have an emergency situation like a pandemic or whatever, then it's those essential workers, the ones that stock the shelves and, you know, police our streets and teach our kids and so forth and so on. They're the ones that are commuting from, in some cases, a different county coming in here. And that does not sound like a good situation to me. That's where I'm coming from. I just want to be clear about why I favor not doing the payment in lieu, but doing units on the ground and lots where a nonprofit like Habitat can put homes in the community makes more sense to me. Because then you're building, like you said, then you're building a community that is functioning at all levels with essential services. And, there's some people that aren't going to want to live in the community. That's okay, but I think we need to provide opportunities for those essential workers that want to live here and take advantage of the good schools and the good services and so forth, the high opportunities. So I'll leave it at that. That's my rationale.
There's a lot to be said in general about affordable housing here. I mean, the land cost is astronomical.
Absolutely.
It is astronomical. So
Yep.
being able to recoup that cost for builders is difficult. Builders, developers, that's why, I had begun to have conversations with the people coming in for rezonings about putting these units within the communities they were already building.
Yep.
So, because exactly what you said, it's better to kind of have a mix instead and kind of distribute throughout the community instead of having specific, communities outside that are, like you said, income based. It is my opinion, with the current makeup of the General Assembly, we will never get a required inclusionary zoning passed, period. Doesn't matter how hard we lobby for it. I don't think it's going to happen. So with the current makeup, if that changes, I think that may be different, but I don't foresee that happening. So having as many voluntary inclusionary zoning policies that we can get that developers and builders appreciate and would take advantage of, it, to me, is the best way to go. And however we need to do that, if density bonus is the big thing that's going to be driving this, then that's what we need to focus on. And we need to potentially target areas of the community where that is going to be the best, the most taken advantage of, right? So the center of town and along 64, 55, 1, all of those areas, that whole,
Transportation corridors.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, and where it makes most sense. It doesn't make sense to do this out at New Hill, right? Or closer to Jordan Lake in that area. But it does make sense to do that toward the center of town and potentially with any redevelopment of these areas, as some of the older homes become target areas for redevelopment, and, those higher densities, it's going to be more desired in those areas. So
Okay.
that's just a little bit of my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments on this part? And can I let Lamont go on to the voluntary part? Go ahead.
I do want to,
Okay, sorry.
this feels a little bit like we're trying to figure out how to improve what we've done before we even know how well what we've done worked. This feels a little bit
I
cart
agree.
ahead of the horse.
I agree. I understand that. Yep.
It seems like understanding how successful it has been should be step one, and then we say, well, what do we need to fix? Let's focus on maybe communities that have done and focus on that part instead of talking about whether mandatory inclusionary zoning can be lawful or not. I feel like that's almost taking us back. I mean, we spent the past 3 years on this program. So this feels a little bit cart ahead of the horse. Also, I'd be interested to see not just what other programs are, but what their success has been as well. I mean, we see Montgomery County, Maryland's numbers, but I think most anybody who's ever looked at inclusionary zoning knows that Montgomery County, Maryland is really its own thing. I don't think there's another program in the nation quite like it. And so, we have Carborough, Davidson, Chapel Hill. What have their numbers been like?
Yep. I agree with you totally. What I would say is that we need that information sooner than the September meeting. And as soon as the housing staff can put that together and send to us, it gives us a chance to think about, what, and I know that, and one of my questions is what the staff recommendation is going to be, but, I think we need to kind of collectively figure out what what's going to be the working solution here? What's the next step in this policy, in this
And I
program?
think that's the approach that we're taking, really just giving you a landscape of options that we might consider. And we may, you know, as I mentioned earlier, use one idea from one place and another from another, but just to really give you the landscape of what is working. And I can say that Montgomery County definitely has a very, very good dashboard. They do a really, really good job. And if you know the communities there and you know the cost as well as the traffic, they have to do something innovative, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to live there. But even if you could, you couldn't get anywhere. You'd have to, I don't know, go underground to get somewhere or fly. So that's what you're saying will be a great segue to the conversation that we bring back in 3 months. And we will be reaching out to these communities.
Except understand what I'm saying, Lamont, is that it can't be in 3 months. I would really like to have it in 2 months, so you give us, you know, the success numbers for the programs that you presented here, both of the required as well as the voluntary, and what our experience has been, like a month before we have the September meeting, so that we have that background. Because just throwing it on us at the last minute, that to me is not a good process. It's not a thoughtful
May I add
process.
something? So this month, June, is a year that this has been in place.
Correct.
We tried to get a head start on research. Rather than not bring anything that lets you know that we've started the work, we brought something. Let me finish. Because, you know, I didn't want us to come and we just simply tell you we're working on it, right? So what we've done is some initial research. The research will continue. We are not looking to make any recommendations today. Not sure if there are going to be hard recommendations that we even make in September. There's a lot of data to be crunched. We'll get our data for sure. We can find out more about those other programs, but there are going to be more programs that we're going to also bring you information on. As I mentioned a moment ago, we're looking at both financial and non-financial incentives. So this was just a taste of some of the work that we've been looking at to let you know that we are moving the ball forward. We're trying to be very strategic and intentional about it. But because the IZ policy has been spoken about a few times prior to today, we thought it would be important to at least let you know the work has gotten started, and it's going to take us a little time, but we're going to get there.
And may I say this too? I appreciate this information, and I appreciate the way it's presented, and kind of these are things we're thinking about. These are things that are out there, and you know, I understand you wanting it so beforehand, but I would rather give y'all the time to actually work on this and bring us a little more, bring more robust information and more detailed information, and give it to us at the last minute than, give us something that's not that well worked out, a month beforehand. So, I understand what you're saying, Phil, but I'm used to getting thousands of pages of information, 3 days before a council meeting that I have to look through. It's normal. It's very, very normal. And just letting you know, I very much appreciate what we have here.
I appreciate the presentation also. I apologize. I'm a little impatient because there are people living in tents in Apex, around Lake Jordan, in sheds without utilities and so forth. And that number is not going down. As we said before, the number of homeless people is going up. And that to me is a sign that there's a problem here. And source of that problem is not having enough affordable housing.
And that's a very understandable concern, right? We want people to be housed, and we want people to have security
Yeah.
and safety and things like that. That is, I think everybody would like that. You know, but we also know that this is not the only thing you do. So just making sure that, you know, no, I don't want you to be over-rushed on this. I want it to be a thorough, thought-out program. And, you know, that's where I'll leave it.
Okay.
Okay. Do you mind? The question I've got is more or less like, what is the timeline or the goal for this? You know, it sounds like this is kind of information. September we'll come back to probably some more information, maybe hopefully more robust. Is it the goal to have like a discussion on recommendations at the September meeting? Is that is the goal?
That's the goal today. Depending on how the research goes, we may need a little extra time.
Understood. Yeah.
So we're thinking maybe December, somewhere.
Yeah, at the
It could
latest.
bleed over to that.
Yeah, it could. I mean, we've had our own kind of like internal charrette, if you will, you know, to think about different opportunities, different program types. And, you know, I'll give you an example of one that I threw out that we'll have to really do a lot of unpacking on, but I've seen it work in other communities. And that's combining an economic development TIF with some spill off into housing.
What is a TIF?
Tax increment finance. So a TIF
Not
district.
familiar with that.
Right. And so but that's one of the things we talked about. There are going to be some ideas that we're looking to possibly bring to you that are also going to require that we explain and have, you know, some understanding on what some of these things are. So it's going to take us a little time, because I think that part of as we bring things to you, we're going to have to do a little educating, right? And so figuring out which are the best ones or have the most likelihood of being successful here, General Assembly notwithstanding, right? And then how do we actually bring it to you in a way that really helps you understand that it could be useful here. So we're kind of doing a two-pronged thing. We can identify the policies, but then how do we explain them, right?
Well, and knowing that, you know, Holly Springs has had quite a few big companies come to the area lately, you know, that would have been a perfect time for this economic TIF to be implemented, you know, had they had that policy in place,
Right.
you know, at the time for affordable housing.
Right.
Because it's not all high-paying jobs. There are going to be people there that don't have that income, that work at those facilities that need to be fairly close, you know?
Yeah.
So.
And if I could do a quick primer, a TIF is basically a property is valued at this today undeveloped. Once it's developed, the value is here. And so that tax increment that would be paid actually for a period of time, sometimes 10 years or whatever, actually gets reinvested back into the development. So that the taxes don't go up necessarily on that development initially, but what the value of that would really be invested into the project. And then after the expiration of that time frame, then the property starts to generate the taxes that it would have initially. So, yeah, so there are all kinds of things that we're aware of and are continuing to research. You know, is there an opportunity here in Apex to do a TIF with some kind of economic development project that might be coming along? Not sure. You know, so and see, even with this research, again, what's allowable at the state level versus, you know, how bad do we want it? Do we want to lobby for it at the state level? So it's a little tedious, and you know, I too wish it could go a little faster, but I want to make sure when we bring you something, you know, it's something that you are excited to pursue and embrace, and see it as making a difference for Apex.
Okay, so all that's good from a practical standpoint, and I tend to be a pragmatist. You know, I see it as a set of steps. We took the first step, and now we're going to incrementally take a second step. And it doesn't need to be the ultimate solution. It just needs to be better than the first step. And so I understand doing research, and I applaud that, but at some point you have to say, okay, given all this information, then how can we make the next step of this process as good as it can be? Because we know we're going to come back in another couple years and do the same thing again, and we'll have more examples out there to look at. But we have to be practical about not waiting until the perfect, because there is no perfect solution. We just need to be incrementally better and be able to provide more affordable housing, you know, over the next couple years. I just want to, you know, I want to say that it doesn't need to be a perfect solution.
Understood. You know, the thing that I like to think about in this instance is there aren't a lot of, I mean, our hands are tied based on what we can do in the state of North Carolina, period. So within our hands being tied, trying to come up with some sort of innovative solution, and it may be stuff that we haven't seen before, right? Yeah. And that this is an opportunity to think creatively and outside the box and have conversations with developers and builders and say, you know, what works? What would bring you to the table to say, yes, I can do this? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's capital, right? It's money, being able to buy the land, being able mm-hmm. to, you know, so just.
Yeah.
Okay.
The math doesn't work on dirt in Apex at all.
I'm sorry?
The dirt in Apex, the math doesn't work for affordable housing, period. Like it doesn't work. It's at the cost to build the dirt. I mean, it to your point, I think it's a creative, it has to be a creative solution because people will defend what they help create. That's, and if builders and developers are not part of this creative solution or wanting to move towards this, because a lot of builders have very strong convictions towards their values and are values-led builders. I think it's critical that it's a collaborative process versus and then something that is mandated. There are a lot of things that are already mandated on builders and developers, and it's difficult to build an Apex. It's difficult to make the math work, even when you're building market rate.
Okay, I think I'm going to move us along at this point because I'm looking at the clock and it's 5 after 11 and we got to 11:30. So appreciate all the input. I know it's all been taken note of and we can move on.
And from a practical perspective, if you like, now that you have the handout, you know, I think we can just mention what the next steps are so that there's still time to get to the rest of the agenda.
Okay.
If that's okay with you all.
That's fine with me. Yeah.
Thank you for the.
Mm-hmm. So can we move on to
Housing program update.
Housing programs update? Yeah. And we do have copies of those handouts. This actually comes from, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but this comes from the work session that the town council did back on April 16th.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I wasn't actually going to present these. These were information.
And by the way, there was a really good presentation by the UNC School of Government Development Finance Initiative. And we were all sent copies of that. But I would encourage you to take a look at that because I think there's really a lot of good information there, including a recommendation to start negotiating for a particular site in Apex to put together affordable homes, to build affordable homes. So,
So these items are both supplemental information from the April 16th meeting. There is a link we created for that segment of the work session where you can actually see the presentations. So that's not something I'm prepared to discuss today.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the presentation that DFI made.
So if you want to see that, we'll get you the link if you didn't get it in the agenda materials.
Okay, thank you.
So just a few updates from community development, the community development side of the house. As you're aware, we have an existing affordable housing plan that was created and adopted back in 2021. Since that time, we are now working with actually the same consultant to update that plan, to give us some real, more updated information about the housing market, any additional tools that they would recommend to use in the market. As you all mentioned, this is a difficult market to even build market rate housing in. So just some real tools and hopefully some tangible outcomes for us to explore in the future, perhaps over a 5-year time horizon. So a little bit of update on the timeline for that is we hope to take that item, the recommended item, or the recommended consultant to council for approval to execute a contract. And we're going to do that at one of the June meetings. And then we hope the engagement will last no longer than 9 months. So we're really looking at the spring of 2025. Gosh, I can't believe I'm saying that. 2025 to bring back the recommendations from that plan.
Mike.
And I'm sorry I'm not using the mic. Thank you. I'm right-handed, so my orientation's kind of right.
So can I just make a quick
Got a
comment?
question about that one? Okay.
If this is truly to be a housing advisory board, meeting every 3 months, which is a bit of a handicap, honestly, then it would be really nice if we would see what was going to the council before it went to the council. Now, I see you looking like, is this guy crazy? But I mean, if we're really truly supposed to be in an advisory capacity, wouldn't it make sense? I mean, I'm actually going to be, at Marla's suggestion, I will be in a focus group that will be talking about what, HRNA will be doing for us, which I really appreciate. And then I guess there's a point where there's going to be, I don't know, is a contract already in place?
There is
for
no
what
contract.
HRNA is going to do?
There
For
is
the
no-
dashboard.
There is no
For the
contract
data
in place.
dashboard, there is a contract. We have not executed the contract yet for the housing plan update. So
Okay.
we are actually in the process right now of getting that drafted, still with the goal of coming to council at the second meeting this month, so that we can get that work underway. So we have an executed contract for the dashboard, and we're working on the one for the housing plan.
So
And I
go ahead.
believe that's the way it worked last time, was that, we contracted with them, they brought the recommendations to the Housing Advisory Board and then brought it to the Planning Board and then to council. So I assume it will work the same way again.
We're like the incentive zoning policy, is that what you're talking about?
For what?
Plan, the
for the
affordable housing plan.
update.
No, the Housing Advisory Board was a recommendation of the plan. We didn't come into existence until after the plan was unanimously approved by the council. Right?
We had,
I think that's right.
yeah, okay. Sorry,
So this is unplowed territory.
sorry.
if-
y'all, I'm
That's okay, but it will,
fixing my
it will,
boards
That's
up here.
okay, that's okay. That's all right.
it will come to the HAB, and as the work of the plan unfolds, there will be opportunities for you all to even participate in some of the public hearings, the meetings, the focus groups. So the idea is to certainly get robust stakeholder and community engagement. Actually, that was a key piece of what was written in the RFP, was that they had to be able to bring robust community engagement. So there'll be opportunities to actually engage with HRNA, and they're subcontracting out actually the community engagement work to another firm where that's all they do is engagement, because we knew we needed a higher level of engagement than we may have had before. And that's part of the reason why it's going to take as long as it is, because there are going to be quite a number of opportunities for engagement, interviewing you guys, the meetings and the so forth. So that one will come to the HAB before it goes to council. I think probably some of the challenge might be, there are some things that are just a part of our work plan and things that we need to do that may have to come on to council because of timing and just general administrative sides of things that we do versus, some of our larger issues around IZ and the Apex Cares, some of the other policy stuff. So there'll be some things that'll kind of just be on their track because of the nature of what they are. But for as many things as possible that could benefit from your advice and your role as an advisory board, then we want to make sure we bring those to you, and we will in fact do that.
Okay, so it sounds like if I know what council meeting it's going to come before, it should be in the packet for that council meeting, and I should be able to look at what's being presented to the council and make comments either in the public comment period or whenever.
And people are free to email council at any point in time too.
Yeah.
So, you can send it to all
As you
council.
know, I do that pretty freely.
Yes, yeah, I'm saying it
Yeah,
so anybody
yeah,
else
yeah.
can do it as
But-
well. So,
okay.
yeah, I mean, if at any point, if people want to email all council about their concerns or their opinions on it, that's their.
Do we know what council meeting in June this is going to be presented? Is it like in a week or in 3 weeks?
3 weeks is the goal.
Okay,
Yeah, the second meeting of the month is the goal.
okay,
Thank you.
okay. Thank you.
So she mentioned the housing dashboard, so that is actually live now. And the first focus group meeting is Friday of this week. And then that will be followed by user acceptance training or user acceptance testing by staff and some others. So just an update there. If you've got access, I know you do, start playing around in there and have some questions on the focus group meeting.
I don't know how to
No,
access it.
they haven't sent the, they sent it just to the staff, the test site. But I received an email yesterday that those who will be a part of the focus group would be receiving an agenda for that focus group probably sometime today. And then their intent is to go into the actual test site where it's built right now as part of the focus group activity on Friday. So the test site is live that we can access internally, but they are going to send an agenda out to the entire focus group probably today.
So as a focus group participant, I
You'll
will
get an
see it on
email.
Friday.
Yes,
Okay, that's fine. Okay,
and Councilmember Killingsworth will make sure that you have access to that because I know about your conflict.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No worries. We'll get you the info.
okay.
Okay. The housing fair back in April was really, in May was really good. No, it was in April. It was April. I'm thinking Peak Fest. Peak Fest was in May.
Yeah.
It was well attended, and I'm thinking we had about 200 residents to attend. Is that number close to what I'm thinking?
Darla told me about 150, just.
150?
just for point of information.
Somewhere in about 150 range in terms of resident participation. But when you add all of the vendors and everybody else, we were knocking at about 200.
Okay, yep, which is roughly twice as many as the home repair fair, so that's great. Going up.
And that doesn't count what we did for Think Revitalize as well, but
Which
We'll
I
get
was
to that.
going to mention next. So on the same day, of course, in conjunction with Think Apex, one of the activities was Think Revitalize, and we actually partnered with Rebuilding Together, volunteers from Rebuilding Together of the Triangle, as well as town staff.
Habitat.
It was Habitat?
The Habitat had a person on site as well.
Yep, they did have one person. Thanks for that. To do some repairs at a home in the Justice Heights neighborhood. So it was a really good experience. I think you will attest. The homeowner was just ecstatic about the work that we did. In fact, true story, she didn't want to be home while we were doing the work. She's made plans with her sister who lives around the corner.
The big reveal.
Yeah, the big reveal. And the big reveal actually was going to be the next day on Sunday. So she scheduled some things to do with her sister. So I think she was really, really excited, and it was a great effort. We did so much work there. We repaired a porch that was in desperate need of repair. There was painting, just all kinds of things. We actually repaired a accessibility ramp at the front of the house. So it was a great day, great
All
activity.
in a half a day, right?
All in a half a day, and the weather was excellent. So that was a real good feel story for me. When you actually do the work, it makes you feel really good, like when you immerse yourself. So hopefully we can do something like that again in Think Revitalize in 2025. This is good. Yeah. And last up, as you know, we produce an annual housing report. And so at the close of the fiscal year, we'll start working on that and bring that forward to you, probably at the September meeting, but maybe the December meeting.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Thank you for your time.
Awesome.
Okay.
Coming under time today.
Unless there are other questions, I think your reward is to get to sit down.
Well, thank you everyone for listening, and got any questions, just reach out.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
very
Thank you so much.
So I, as usual, did have a couple of comments, observations. So just at the point when the housing staff was fully on board, we had a departure. Michael Linsenmeyer, really, he should be here to hear this, but I want to praise him for keeping things running as the sole member of the housing staff at one point, and he did a terrific job. He really did. We're going to miss him. My hope, my dream is that the position will be filled as soon as practical to bring the staff back up to full capacity, because we've got a lot to do. In terms of the budget, we've had a little discussion about it. I just want to bring to the attention of the board members something that I'm sure Marla and her staff already knows, that the housing staff budget has shifted, at least a good part of it, from the general operating budget to the Affordable Housing Fund. And that was a decision of town council. And I respect their decisions because they have a view of much more than I have a view of. I'm just hoping that maybe it's a temporary shift and not a permanent shift. The reason being that it takes money away from the actual solutions. However, I want to put a footnote on that I have argued since we put together the Affordable Housing Plan that the staff, the housing staff, should be able to pretty much pay for itself by the grants and all the other revenues, let's say, that are brought in to the program. And Marla's given me a worried look, but to the extent that there's cooperation with the county and federal grants and so forth, I think there is an opportunity to bring in additional funding. Maybe I shouldn't call it revenue, maybe I should call it funding for our programs, because we need it. We absolutely need it. And I have also heard from another council member that because of the revaluations of our properties, that the 1 cent, we had 1 cent, it went to 1.5 cents, I guess, last fiscal year, and that's back to 1 cent for this fiscal year. I'm talking about through this month. That 1 cent will bring in not 1.2 million, but $1.9 million, which is great. Maybe that's part of what funds the housing staff. So that's all I'll say on that. I want to make sure that the other board members are aware of that. I'm really happy with what we did with what the staff did with Apex Care revisions. I'm glad that we got all the information and we passed it. I think that's a step forward. because we need to focus not only on building homes, but keeping affordable homes, the naturally occurring affordable homes, in our inventory. That's really, really important, especially with the price of land going up, because we see a lot of cases of, affordable homes being bought, especially near the downtown area, being torn down and being replaced by something that's probably a little less affordable. So in terms of the proposed agenda topics, I noticed that there was nothing listed on the agenda. But here are the things that I would suggest that we consider. I would like to hear the status of the UNC School of Government's Development Finance Initiative's recommendations. There were some good recommendations on April 16th to the council. I'd like in September to hear how that's going, and if it's another department that's taking the lead on moving forward on that, maybe we could get them to come and speak. We already talked about the proposed revisions to the incentive zoning policy. It'll be good to hear that. To the extent that we can hear some previews of that beforehand, that would be wonderful. So one of the things that I'm going to bring up in the focus group, and I hope I'm not too much of a pain in the butt, but it's like we have a continuing need to estimate the gaps in affordable housing. And I mean, people that are cost burdened, renters that are cost burdened, homeowners that are cost burdened, but even more important to me, I just mentioned before, are the essential workers that don't have the opportunity to live in our town. And we really need it by particular bands of area median income, like up to 30%, 30 to 50, 50 to 65, 65 to 80, and 80 to 100. Because knowing where the gaps are, and my intuition tells me that there are huge gaps that are down towards the lower end of those. That will give us good information in terms of where the programs that we put in place, should cover those gaps. So just for example, the housing needs assessment that DFI did and presented in December to this group, they identified 770 low and moderate income renters and 650 low and moderate income homeowners who are already severely cost burdened, which means they're paying 50% or more for their housing expenses. We know what happens in that case. Then there are other bills that don't get paid. There are other, critical expenses like healthcare and transportation and so forth that fall off the table. And so that should be a driving force here. And the other statistic that really caught my attention is that at least 1,800 homes in town that are affordable to households earning 50 to 80% of the AMI are occupied by households earning greater than 80% of AMI. And so, I'm sure builders and developers are saying, well, yeah, of course, we've got shortages right across the spectrum. And that is true. We have a problem with too much demand and not enough supply. And so that's something that we need to grapple with, because we see what the impacts are. And then one of my pet projects, if you will, is our plans to protect the residents of our manufactured home communities, including a change to our 2045 land use plan. And maybe as a part of our September meeting, the planning staff could give an update on discussions with owners of our manufactured home communities, and maybe the housing staff could update us on exploring the possibility of the town teaming with at least one nonprofit to buy at least one of our manufactured home communities. And maybe we could invite a member of the county housing department to update us on the submission for federal funding under the PRICE program. These are just suggestions. And the last thing I want to mention is that I know Cary has a program specifically targeting developers, to recognize developers that really do a good job of putting together the funding and the financing necessary to provide housing for our low and moderate income neighbors. And I know that this is above and beyond what housing staff can do right now, but I think that could be a really effective way to promote or to really show examples of what we think developers should be doing. So, you know, and I think that's something that a number of us here on the board could work on and put together the criteria for. So with that, we're just about out of time. Any comments to my comments?
A couple of comments.
Sure.
So, when council made the decision to use the Affordable Housing Fund for staffing, there was a robust conversation during that period of time in the budget work session. I'm not going to rehash that, but if you want that information, go look at that.
The recording, right? Okay.
And then, you know, part of what I see as, you know, the overarching affordable housing plan, housing staff is part of the solution. If we did not have housing staff, we would not have a solution, because we don't have the people to
That's
do
true.
the
Yeah.
work to get there. So in my opinion, that, you know, that is a very critical piece, and y'all are doing an amazing job at getting us to, you know, the fruition of what the affordable housing plan does for the town of Apex and the residents. So that's
Thank
all
you.
I'll say there.
I thought you had more than one comment.
Those were the two.
Oh, okay. Okay, all right. Any other comments? Okay, thank you all for joining us, and thank you to those of you who are watching the live stream or the recording. And I look forward to meeting again in September. I think it's September 3rd, the day after Labor Day, which prevents me from going on vacation that week, but that's okay. This is more important than my vacation. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, that's all we need. We're adjourned. Thank you.